Hi, I'm Dakini Sophie. I'm a sex life coach, and I have asked my email list if they would like to ask me any question on sex and pleasure today. So I'll be answering those questions now. The first question is whether a woman needs to have an orgasm to have pleasure. So that's a kind of yes and no answer. It depends on the sexual situation, it depends on the relationship, depends on the feelings of the woman at the time. What I will say is generally most couples will be attempting to pursue a clitoral orgasm. It's just the most commonly known about orgasm. Generally that's what people are talking about when they say orgasm. So when you are attempting to get to a clitoral orgasm, you're often missing out on other kinds of pleasure. So, yeah, coming back to the question, if you're relying on having just a clitoral orgasm, then yeah, you kind of do want to have that, because otherwise it's just a build-up and then it's not there. So that could be frustrating. Similar to a man, if he's got his mind set on ejaculating and he doesn't, that can be a little bit frustrating. But what I will say is, if you're able to learn about different kinds of orgasms, take G-spot orgasm for example, that's kind of the next easiest one to learn and most commonly known about. So if you're able to come away from that vigorous pursuit of friction-based clitoral orgasms, if you're able to let go of just focusing on the clit and rubbing and trying to get there in that way, then you can spend some time focusing specifically on the G-spot area. So that's on the front wall of the vagina. If your woman is lying on her back, it will be towards the top. It's a kind of protruding area that is slightly rough, maybe rigid to the rigid sense. And if you can rub gently on that, in and out, stimulate that area, it's likely that your woman will be able to experience G-spot orgasms, which are a great deal different to clitoral orgasms. So whereas the clitoral orgasm is very contractual, the muscles are contracting at the time you orgasm, very similar to an ejaculation for a man. In a G-spot orgasm, they are a lot more gentle, a lot more amorphous, like there's not such a clear beginning and end. So they're like waves that happen of a peak state, waves of a peak state. And you can have a woman can have a lot more G-spot orgasms in a sexual session than a clitoral orgasm. Clitoral orgasm, she might have 1, 2, 3, but often after that she would have had enough and it will kind of be the end of the session, a little bit like it is for an ejaculation for a man. So I've gone off on a tangent here, but no, a woman doesn't need to have an orgasm to have pleasure, but if you can learn some skills in pleasuring and skills in how to get to other kinds of orgasm, it makes the journey a lot more varied. If the journey is just heading towards clitoral orgasm, it's not very interesting. There's not many other sensations. That's what I want to say. So the next question is, for a man, the obvious and pretty much guaranteed ending of ejaculation is the ultimate sign of satisfaction. This is still part of the first question, but I just want to say something about that one sentence. No. Many men have experienced having an ejaculation without having any pleasurable sensations. Orgasm and ejaculation are two separate physiological functions. They can happen independently. Generally, they happen together. That's what you'll see in porn. That's what you'll see in most normal sexual situations for the man. The climax is seen as the ejaculation and a pleasurable sensation that accompanies that. Because we can separate those things, it's great to have a go at that. And I'm not saying, never ejaculate again, but it's great to learn about having orgasmic sensations without ejaculating. because then as a man you can have pleasure, you can be in a sexual situation for longer, and you don't have that kind of full stop at the end of, okay, I'm tired now, I'm not very aroused, I don't really want to continue. The drop in energy that comes with an ejaculation. So this same person goes on to ask, for me the most exciting part of sex is giving, but whilst throughout there may be moans of satisfaction, an orgasm is not necessarily an obvious outcome. So I think what he's asking here is, perhaps he can't tell if his partner is having an orgasm. And that can be a really common situation. Often women are not fully confident in their sexual expression. Maybe they've had difficult experiences in the past, traumatic experiences in the past, or there's just some shyness there. So they don't want to move their bodies much, they don't breathe very much, they don't make many sounds. So in that situation, it is very easy to miss an orgasm. I remember in my past, before I did any work on sexuality, on becoming more orgasmic, on feeling more pleasure in my body, I could orgasm and the person wouldn't really notice. It was quite quiet. There may be some slightly heavier breathing towards the end, and this was just clitoral orgasms. That's all I knew about at that time. So yeah, women also, it's great if women are able to do some work on their sexuality to become more able to express pleasure when they're having it. Of course, you can't always control that. That is entirely up to the woman, and if she's not up for doing it, she's not up for doing it. But what we cannot expect is for the men to be magical thinkers or mind readers. So if the woman isn't able to show with her body that she's enjoying it, maybe communication. Communication is the next step. I always encourage couples to communicate about sex. I meet many people who say, oh, I want you to teach me how to pleasure my wife, my partner really well, but she doesn't tell me what she likes or what she doesn't like, or she'll maybe give me the odd hint, but she's not really telling me what it is she enjoys, so I'm guessing. And that is a situation that really doesn't have a lot of hope. So I can always teach people skills in that situation, but I can never guarantee that doing X, Y, Z in this order will work on every person or on every woman. Communication, you can't get past that really. So what I would recommend to women is to breathe more. Often when we get aroused, we kind of make our breath shallow and we don't breathe much. It's like we're holding our breath just to get to that next bit, which is the orgasm. And you'll have much more fulfilling experiences if you breathe a bit more. Like, learning to breathe has been a key part for me in becoming more orgasmic. I'm now at the point where I can take 2 breaths and I'm in a kind of whole body energetic orgasm. It's not like a clitoral orgasm, it's nothing like that, it's like a whole body experience. So working with the breath is so important. I will do more videos on that in the future. Sound and movement are also keys. You'll hear in Tantra a lot about breath, sound and movement. Making sounds, it kind of keys in with the breath. So if you're breathing in, and then breathing out and making sound at the same time, it's almost like a sigh as you breathe out. I won't go too much into this now because it's a whole video in itself. But movement as well. If you can move, the more you can move your body, it's like the movement kind of amplifies the sexual energy. It allows it to move through your body even more. So if I'm being pleasured and I stay completely still, it's likely that pleasure will stay and that energy will stay just in my genitals where I'm being pleasured. But if I'm moving my body, it's kind of encouraging the pleasure to go through the whole of the body. So this guy concludes by asking, again, is orgasm important to a woman? And if so, how can I further help her achieve this? Yes, of course, orgasm is important, but there are sexual situations where a woman can not have an orgasm but still have had a really wonderful time. I think it's actually more a man's thing. If he's got his mind set on ejaculation, that might be disappointing for him, and less so for women. Obviously, I can't speak for every woman, but if you're able to take your woman to various peaks of pleasure, which are not necessarily a full orgasm, that's going to be a pretty amazing sexual experience. If you're also able to drop this idea that she must have a clitoral orgasm every time sex takes place, you're then open to much more expansive experiences. She gets this sense from you that you're not trying to make her do anything. You're not trying to get anything. You're just there in the moment, responding to what's happening. Your pleasure is what you're pursuing, and that's all. So yeah, I would say really drop this compulsion almost to make her orgasm. Learn some other skills. Look at pleasure in a more expansive way. There'll be more videos on that. So the next question is, if a woman has been intimate in the past with a man with a much larger penis, is it wrong to assume she thinks about this still? So the first thing I would say is any assumption without actually asking the person is a big waste of time and a big waste of energy. So if you're thinking about this and it's bothering you, I would really encourage you to ask her about it. However, I also want to say this. What you're doing there ultimately is comparing yourself unfavorably to this other man and whatever attributes you have projected onto him. So it's kind of, it's low self-esteem. It's coming from a low self-esteem place. It's like you're feeling like, oh, he was better than me because he had whatever. And it's never going to end well. If she's with you now, she's with you for who knows how many reasons. The other thing I want to say is the big penis thing. I really don't think that pleasure is tied to the size of a penis. My understanding from the work that I've done and the journey I've been on with my body is that pleasure is much more likely you're much more likely to have a higher level of pleasure if you have had enough time and enough of the right kind of touch to get you to that place. So a fully aroused yoni can have one finger inserted and it can feel amazing. I've had hours-long sexual experiences where there's not been any penetration, penis and vagina penetration. It's just been one finger. And I've had a baby, so, you know, it's not about size, it's about arousal. If the woman's not fully aroused, then, yeah, maybe a bigger penis would feel better. I don't know. Actually, I don't think so, because if she's not fully lubricated and her tissues haven't expanded and got really moist and juicy and puffy, then a big penis, I just can't see how that is going to be better than being in full arousal and having something smaller inserted. Yeah, that's my personal experience. Yeah, I think this big penis thing is a distraction away from what's really important. What's really important is that the woman is fully aroused before penetration happens, not the size of the penis. Next question is, in order to experience full body orgasms and be able to move my partner's sexual energy, is it necessary to have had a full Kundalini awakening and rising? I'm not an expert on this. I haven't studied various theory about energy movement, but I've always been a person whom sexual energy moved quite freely through my body. I'm also very able to teach and regularly do teach men who are average guys who've never done a yoga class, who aren't particularly into spiritual practices, haven't read spiritual texts, are very ordinary guys. I regularly teach them to move sexual energy through my body. So I'm already open to that. I will say it might be harder if you're not used to doing that kind of thing on a woman who's also not used to, has not experienced that kind of thing before. But I don't think you need to have any particular initiation, personally. I've had, like I say, I've had very ordinary guys who I've instructed from the beginning what different kinds of touch to do, how to stroke the whole length of the body, non-oil touch, oil massage. I've had them be able to move sexual energy through my body. And yeah, so I would say don't worry too much about that. And the same person asked another question. I sometimes feel a kind of erotic sensation in my belly and groin area. And my perineum becomes so sensitive that it makes me desire to have some kind of a release. Instinctively, I would go for a vigorous masturbation with ejaculation in the end. But I wouldn't like to waste my energy that way. What would you suggest me to do? So I would suggest a self-pleasuring ritual, and I have this, I can cut and paste and send this out. I give it to many of my clients, but for this particular guy, I would particularly recommend lots of peaks rather than going over into an ejaculation. So imagining that 10 is ejaculation and orgasm for this particular scale. What I would suggest you do is take yourself up to a 6 or maybe a 7, erring on the side of 6. So it's not really close to ejaculating. 9 is that point of no return where if you take your hands off and stop, you're still going to go over the edge. I would say to play with peaks of pleasure around the 6 and maybe 7 mark, and to do lots and lots of those. And what that will help you do is have kinds of release in having orgasm without ejaculation. It is a practice. I'm not saying you'll do it the first time and you'll get it. But what you're doing is you're conditioning your body not to go on this very typical up peak ejaculation and down that most people do before they've had any training in this. So you're going to go up to a 6 or 7, and then you're going to let that pass, and then you're going to go up to a 6 or 7 again. I would also recommend erring on the side of gentle when you pleasure yourself, when you masturbate, because he mentioned in the question vigorous masturbation. So vigorous masturbation really takes you out of the more subtle, more energetic sexual experiences that you can have, and it takes you into very genital-based, very friction-based, very isolated in the genitals kind of pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that, but in order to experience more expansive states, I would recommend you go as gently as you can to still feel pleasure. Experiment with slower, softer strokes. Using oil is really recommended for this. You may also want to stroke up the body, so you're feeling this sensation in your belly and groin area. You may want to stroke that up your chest, stroke it and move it around your body. Again, oil is helpful in this case. That will help you move the energy through your body rather than the energy sitting low down in your pelvic area, in your groin, and just wanting to release out through an ejaculation. You also want to use breath, sound and movement as much as you can, and that will be a release of sorts, but not the same kind of release that you're used to with ejaculation. So it leads you into that space where you're more likely to have whole body orgasms or whole body pleasure. Have an experiment with that. And the last question is, in my limited experience, I've noticed that women enjoy foreplay and soft touch. However, sooner or later, it seems that they really look forward to that point when you penetrate or take her as long as it takes to that climax. I personally don't like to think that it's all about the penetration, and I enjoy the other things as well. Hence, my question is, how important is genital penetrative sex to women? So, obviously there is a biological drive for penetration. We are still here as a species because we're having penetrative sex that ends in ejaculation. And that is not the best formula for amazing pleasure. I would recommend that you touch the whole of her body, and then later, when you pleasure her, you use your hands on her yoni and you pleasure her in various different ways. That will get her to a point where she's so aroused that penetration is really just a part of what's happening. It's not the be all and end all, but it will be there as a desire for her. It will be there as a desire because we, as human beings, we have this innate desire to merge, to come together, to join. You can't get rid of that, of course, and there's nothing wrong with penetration. So, but I think it is also idealized as this the best thing, the thing that everybody's trying to get to, the only thing, and the thing that has to happen in every single sexual encounter when you're a couple, an established couple. It really isn't. I think there's so much pleasure that can be had with hands, and much of my coaching, my hands-on coaching sessions, I teach people how to use their hands to pleasure their partners. Sometimes also people rush towards penetration through anxiety. Maybe they don't know what else to do. They've done what they know and they don't know what else to do. So, hey, let's move on to the next stage. Nervous, anxious, and it just seems like the thing that the other person wants and they go along with it. And what that can mean is that you're missing a lot of the other opportunities to have different kinds of pleasure. You're also missing an opportunity if you rush too soon to penetration where the yoni isn't fully aroused, the woman isn't fully ready for that penetration. So, I think I've answered those adequately. If you have any other questions, please do put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.